Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, where we discuss everything strange, obscure, and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. So, Gary, what film are we going to discuss today?
Directed by Harmony Korine, Spring Breakers follows a group of bored college girls as they embrace a life of crime to finance their spring break. Starring Selena Gomez and Vanessa Hudgens, deliberately playing against their traditional personas, the film was Korine's most mainstream film to date, but proved divisive with critics, some seeing it as superficial and pretentious, while others have seen it as a future cult classic.
So, Gary, you really introduced me to Harmony Korine's films. I know you're a, I think you're, I'd say you're a fan, a big fan of Harmony Korine. So, let's get your thoughts on this film and what you thought when we first saw it, because we first saw it together.
Yeah, it was surprising that when the film was released, because it was a bit of a misnomer that even though Crean had worked with some sort of slightly well-known actors, like he hadn't traditionally worked with like mainstream stars. Um, so it was intriguing, and I think Kareen has had quite an up and down maybe filmography. Started with like Gummo and Jill and Donkey Boy, I think are great. Then Mr. Lonely, Trash Humpers were interesting but not that great. And then he sort of came out kind of out of the blue with such a mainstream film, or ostensibly superficially mainstream. But I
Yeah.
think it's probably his best film. I think it's a brilliant
Mm.
piece of work. Um, yeah, I just love Kareen's style. I think it's got brilliant, loose. I love the cinematography. It's got a loose handheld cinematography style. The look of the film is amazing. It's got a kind of dreamlike quality. Sort of drenched in neon lights. Kareen talked about kind of making it look like candy. Yeah, but it's got like a real experimentation at its heart. It kind of feels like Gaspar Noé with a bit of Terrence Malick. Obviously, the cinematographer Benoit Debie had worked with Noé before. I love this kind of editing style in the narrative, which Karine has described as liquid narrative, where you have a sort of dreamlike elliptical cutting, where you have like maybe you have a certain scene, a framing scene, but within that he's sort of cutting back and forward to previous scenes or scenes that haven't happened yet. I love that kind of flow of that. Yeah, there's a lot of things like repeated narrative threads, like repeated phrases. Crean talked about embracing sort of repetition you get in dance music, and using that as sort of a narrative style. But yeah, so
Mm.
what did you make of it?
Yeah. I, I could. I'm going to just really add up on top of what you've said there. I find this film incredibly exciting to watch, because of the editing style that's used, and the kind of, it is almost hypnotic in a way. Um, it's like, visually it's like part like ultra modern documentary, part music video, uh, and then like eventually part like 80s action flick. You know what I mean? It's kind of all rolled into this kind of weird kind of goodie bag of styles and themes, and just awesome scenes that just kind of, I don't know. They just, it's kind of like, with Gummo and, and Julian Donkey Boy as well. It's kind of carrying over those kind of, um, loose narrative threads. But this, I mean, this does have a narrative thread. It really does have a story. But still, he manages to not stray away from, or too far away from his own style, and kind of doing it on his terms. Um, yeah, the I remember kind of joking at the time that we were going to go and see the new Selena Gomez and Vanessa Hudgens film. Like the kind of Disney, like
Yeah.
kids, in this Harmony Green flick. But I think all the performances from the girls are really good, um, and like James Franco is just, I don't know. Every time I watch it, he comes into it, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this character, but then he just wins me over
Mm.
every time. It's It's really is. It's something spectacular to watch, and even like the the sound design, and the music choices really just make it feel like this kind of, as you say, kind of. I think it's the best probably Harmony Korine film that I've seen. Um, Even though I'd say Gummo's maybe has that kind of has that kind of raw nature to it, right?
Mm.
Where this does feel a bit more polished. But again, the cinematography, it just looks stunning. So many times I was watching it again, and I just was like, "Whoa, this!" Like, you forget of how you think of the kind of bright, the neon colors, and the kind of the kind of, you say, the Skittles like look, the candied look
Mm.
of the colors. But there's some shots that are just gorgeous, and set pieces that are just so well constructed. And we'll talk more about the plot in a sec. But yeah, I think that's. I hadn't seen it in a while, and you're not sure how something's going to sit with you again. But I really was just entranced with it the whole way through. It was, and right up to probably one of my favourite musical scenes in a film ever. When he's playing the piano
Right.
with the Britney Spears song. I don't know. There's something just so. It starts off like a joke, almost, but he manages to turn it. Korine manages to turn it into this like awesome kind of montage scene that really does kind of draw you into these characters. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, again, I could go on as well, but I think I really like this film.
Yeah. It's an interesting one plot wise because I think when you really boil it down, it's got quite a traditional narrative arc, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of plays on traditional gangster movies. I think where it's just the idea of having nothing and like breaking the law to create your own American dream, which is kind of flows through all the old gangster movies, and particularly Scarface, De Palma's Scarface, which is referenced directly in this movie.
On
Um,
repeat.
yeah. So yeah, in some ways it's got like a very um, obvious plot, but obviously it sucks that right down underneath to the point where people critique it for not having been too loose and not having anything going on plot wise. But it does like to play with it plays with image more than narrative. The narrative is there. It's like, but it's very thin. It doesn't really build the characters at all, which in some ways you might think it's a bit of a criticism, but I don't think Karine's really interested in that. I don't think that takes anything away from the film because I think what Karine's doing is more interesting. He's just sort of playing with the sort of the experience, creating a film which is an experience through image and editing and sound. Yeah, and it does something that he kind of has done throughout his career, where there's elements of like almost documentary realism, where he's just catching shots of just kind of real life going around it, but he also has a kind of magical realist fantasy thing going on as well, where in a lot of ways the film is completely far fetched, and it feels dreamlike. But I do like that blend that Karine can do, where he can sort of traverse these two worlds. Because a lot of time, as I was saying, he's not capturing narrative elements, he's not capturing exposition, he's just capturing things that are happening in front of the camera, which I think is really great.
Yeah. We're talking about you're talking about characters there, and it's interesting. It was really I think it's really obvious when you watch this film again. Like it's definitely like a two-part film, right? It definitely changed. There's definitely a flip in the middle where this film, I feel, changes kind of focus. We start off kind of really, if you want to say a main character, would be the Selena Gomez character. She's the kind of, the good girl type character with her kind of mischievous friends who are kind of dragging her into the darkness a little bit, even though they're all going on spring break and they seem to be having fun there. But then we get the flip when they get arrested, and I really love that. the way that's I don't really know if it's a grading choice, it's an effect, right? But like the way that when they're arrested, they get arrested, what you're saying about the flipping back and forth, the editing style, and it kind of goes to that kind of like as if the image is burning out. It's like showing you the images from before again, of the party, and it's like almost like this kind of fading into like a watercolor or a burnt image, burnt piece of film, as it kind of fades into this arrested, them being arrested and then going to jail and stuff. And then we get the introduction. We've already seen Alien, the character, James Franco's character, but then he comes in and kind of rescues them. And there's this literal on-screen like kind of battle between Selena Gomez, the main character that we've followed up to this point, and Alien, who I feel the second half of the film becomes the main character, right? He's the focus. He's the one that we find out about their life in the second half of the film, right? Or more about their life. And then we literally get that scene with the two of them kind of facing off almost. He's trying to get her to stay with her friends and she just doesn't want anything to do and wants to go home. So it's a really cool, looking at it, because at the time, watching it the first time, it's like you are very suspicious of Alien and you're not really, you get why she's afraid of like, staying and stuff like that. And he's been suggestive and a wee bit creepy, which I still felt this time. Again, even though I feel like he kind of, again, he wins me over after this. But it was really cool to see that again. And then from there on, he really takes the lead. And we don't really find out much about any of the other characters. I mean, I think the Ashley Benson character really stuck out to me this time. How like there's a scene near the end where I think it transpires after like the climax of the film, right? But her and Vanessa Hudgens are phoning home for the first time. We've seen Selena Gomez phoning home and kind of talking to her mum or whatever. And I'm like, I don't think this is the most dialogue I feel that like Ashley Benson's had in this film, and it's the first time we've actually seen any kind of characterization. I think beyond that, even she's in, she's in the scene, because the scenes with like Alien and Vanessa Hudgens and Ashley Benson and what's Harmony Korine's wife's name? Sorry. Rachel Corrine. I feel like Vanessa Hudgens very much seems to lead those scenes, right? She seems to be I don't know, maybe it's just the choice of the shots or whatever, but it feels like we get the most kind of personality maybe coming to the surface of that character. So it was really kind of like, I was like, oh, like it just was startling how much like that was the first we were seeing anything of this character.
Yeah.
In the closing minutes of this film. Does that make sense?
And it didn't occur to me until reading about the film that after watching the film, I had no idea what Selena Gomez or Ashley Benson's character names were.
Faith.
I can remember
Faith,
Selena Gomez, yeah. But the other two, I was like, I didn't realize
Candy or something like that, or
yeah, Britt and Candy, I think.
Yeah, I noticed that this time I couldn't tell you which one was which, but it was just at the beginning when Selena Gomez is talking to like her church friends, and they're talking about Brittany and Candy being like kind of like bad eggs, but and Rachel Corine's character, what's her character?
I think Cootie.
Oh, okay,
something like that.
Yeah, no, right, that's right. But but anyways,
but that shows you how unusual the film is, because not any standard film. Names are being said over and over and over, but this doesn't care about that.
Because everything's, it's like what I saying about the documentary style of it almost. It's like every conversation, other apart from like maybe a couple, it feels like you're just dropping in on it. That way you're just kind of passing by and picking up some dialogue. You know what I mean? None of it feels staged for a camera. There's definitely a few scenes in the film that are and do feel like that, but for a lot of it and all the kind of establishing stuff at the beginning, the kind of exposition stuff about them wanting to go spring break, it all feels that we're just jumping in on a conversation and then kind of jumping away again, which I think is a strength of the film, but I think that's what leads to us it's very easy to miss kind of stuff like that, right? Like names and stuff.
Correction, Rachel Corine's character's Cotty, not Cootie.
Cotty.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, Cotty. Okay, yeah. but yes, I don't know. I don't know if there's more to that. The kind of the these girls that are these characters that are on the edge of kind of their own corruption, and their good friend like is there trying to pull them away from this, in theory bad force or negative force, and then she leaves, and then it just kind of careens into no pun, but it careens into this like crime drama almost,
Right.
it's interesting to think of that way. I don't know if that was intentional or what, but like, it's a very clear jump in the film, I think.
Yeah. I think the Selena Gomez character works well in the middle of the film as a kind of moral voice, because when the alien character comes in, you don't know where it's going to go, and he's super sleazy, and it's like, this isn't good. But at least she voices a kind of a rejection of his advances for the audience, and then we see how that the Brett and Candy characters actually are able to exert their own power over Alien as well, completely kind of flipping the traditional kind of maybe expectations of the gender roles, which is good.
I was going to say, I think that scene between Faith and Alien, just when you're talking about it there, talking about this moral standpoint, and we don't know what his purpose is. It feels almost like a last temptation of Christ almost moment, right? Like it's like the devil talking to Jesus to try, to convince him to, but you know what I mean? It's almost like that, because he's trying, and then because he says, when I'm with your friends, I'll be thinking about you. And it's almost like he's, it's if you want, like with Star Wars, it's like Palpatine and Anakin, right? Like he's trying to turn to that dark side, right? It's it's, I don't know. It just in that moment it feels like it's his ploy is corruption. You know what I mean?
Because one of the debates around the film is it exploitation, or is it profound, statement on youth culture? Different critics have taken different stances on that. I mean, I saw this article today from the Guardian. It was talking about how it promotes rape culture. Mark Kermode's called it quite exploitative and leery. Because I mean, it did occur to me watching it again. I think there is an area of ambiguity to the film that would give some credence to that argument, and I think it's a kind of eternal argument that we see with sexuality, particularly female sexuality in pop culture. There was the whole debate around WAP, the Cardi B song, about female sexuality. And that's an area I don't feel like as a man I kind of really can comment on with authority. But I think the film itself, I think the first part of the film could maybe be seen as being a wee bit having a bit of a leery camera. There's loads of female nudity, not the equivalent male nudity. But for me, I think there is enough. I don't think any shot in the film is without a slight hint of irony from Kareen. I think he's a smart enough filmmaker. I think other filmmakers might do the same film, like have that kind of leery camera on female bodies and do it straight up without any sense of ironic distance. But I think Kareen's always there's always that element in there for me. But then as the film moves on, we get into more of the satire, and you can see where the film's heart is. I think that it's actually a critique of hip hop culture, of the shallowness of it, the superficiality of it. It's definitely through the alien character and his insane, incredible monologue. Look at my shit. So yeah, but I think if people want to attack the film for being a bit potentially exploitative, I wouldn't push back too hard on that. But I don't think that's where the film's heart is. But I think there's elements that there's grounds to make that valid. But I think that's because the film kind of exists in this kind of ambiguous realm where it's both, showing the kind of hedonism of the spring break culture, not looking down upon it, but kind of depicting it, but also sort of satirising it as well, and how that spring break hedonist culture fuels in, it sort of merges into the wider kind of hip hop and gangster culture as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When we first watched this, there's definitely scenes, and it was weird. It was probably the kind of early scenes with the girls like weirdly in their dorm, like, in the hallway doing cartwheels and stuff. There's a few shots there that even this time I was like, it felt a little leery, little voyeuristic. But I think that's a byproduct of Green's style. Maybe the way it's the way that, it's shot handheld and the kind of, you see, like just letting things happen on camera. But honestly, I think anyone who can get through that opening scene with the with the Skrillex music and the Spring Breakers going wild, and not like chuckle and realize that this is supposed to be a satire. I don't know how you can get through that and not be like, wait a minute, it's, to me, it's like just the mixture of the music and the imagery just feels so. It's just funny, it really does. It always breaks me up because it's such a bombastic opening, and then we get right down nice and calm. And I think for the first half of the film, again, up until the kind of the party stuff happens, there's a lot of serenity to the film, and then once the party stuff happens again, we get back to that satire. So yeah, I feel the same as you. As you can't really push back on it, but I really don't think that was the intention. And as you say, I think the rest of the film proves that, because we definitely, it doesn't stay that way. I don't feel that way in the second half of the film necessarily. I think that it's the spring break part of the film, maybe a little, but I think that's kind of more a comment on spring break than anything he's trying to do or show. Yeah. One of my favorite bits of the film, other than the Britney Spears music break, is the scene where the girls go in and rob the diner. And even this time I was watching it, and I just love the way that we see it first, and how it's like kind of one continuous shot round the outside of the diner, and we stay with the Cotty character in the car, and we don't really hear anything. It's just, I think I can't remember, there's this kind of nice music. I think just it's quite a peaceful scene, right? Like, but I totally forgot how they bring it back later on in the film, and then it's suddenly this like crazy, violent, like horrible scene, like really with these girls, screaming and robbing these people. So there's something, I don't know, something really cool about that. The fact that they managed to kind of have it both ways almost, show this really cool artsy kind of version of the robbery in a quite a cool technical way, and then they kind of show the kind of, it's like it's almost like kind of what I'm looking for, idealizing it, this robbery. It was easy, they're just in and out kind of thing, and then we kind of see the actual blunt force trauma of the act. So that always sticks with me, those two kind of parts.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, another thing you might criticise the film for, in the character wise, we get the impression that the characters, the female leads, are only into sex, money, and drugs, and guns. And I think because of Kareen's style, that he's not doing traditional characterization, they maybe don't get backed up with a kind of fleshed out real life nuts and bolts things. So maybe in that respect, the characters seem sexualized and kind of stereotypes. But I think that's more in the nature of Kareen's style rather than
I mean,
maybe directorial intention, but
yeah, I mean, and
and
again,
plus they never wear clothes apart from bikinis.
I mean, yeah, I was going to say something just to kind of
mm,
devil's advocate there a little bit. Yeah, that I can't argue with that. Yeah, you can't
yeah,
argue with that. I was going to just say that I guess you could also say that about the male characters in the film. So is that like they're really just interested in sex, money, and drugs as well?
true, yeah,
And is that,
yeah.
I mean, is that more of a stereotype? I don't know. I don't. But yeah, at least they don't have to wear bikinis. But it did look pretty warm, so they were probably fine.
mm.
They'd get to wear those when they were wearing the pink ski masks. They had like a onesie type thing. It wasn't a bikini, with tracksuit
Mm.
bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you're lying there, but um, um,
I do think this is probably, yeah, I'd go for this as being Kareen's best. I think the kind of minor criticisms I might have of it is maybe the slight leeriness occasionally, and that maybe that Kareen talks about the film in the director's commentary in quite profound ways. That's maybe more, it's not quite as, maybe clever as he's thinking it is,
right.
arguably. But I think it has a depth that,
Mm-hmm.
but I think his vision was, he's trying to say something quite profound about modern culture,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if really comes across. I think partially because of the style of it, and it's not settling into a narrative that can really dig into themes in a way that a traditional film would. But
I think also the kind of the way that he pushes the edges of reality. As you say, that I think some parts are a bit far fetched. So that kind of
yeah,
maybe lessens the impact of the kind of the
mm-hmm.
comment. Yeah.
But they're kind of minor criticisms. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, great piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same, totally on board. I've not seen all of these films, but of the ones I've seen, I think this is personally most rewatchable. I would highly recommend it. It's a very exciting film visually, and stylistically and musically. Yeah, it's a really fun film.
Final thing, I do think one of the final shots is quite important though, in the sense that when Britt and Candy escape in the Lamborghini to go home, that we do see them like looking very somber and sad, which I think is a kind of a comment on everything they've done.
Well, and
they're not celebrating at that point.
And they have so the conversations with their mums or whatever appears to take place after the shoot, the fight, and they definitely seem very like, we want to be good now, right? Like that, they want to go back to school. They kind of want to get back to their lives. Yeah, so
yeah, I think that's important, as it kind of subtly gives a depth to the characters. Right at the end, where at that point they're no longer celebrating the violence and the hip hop lifestyle that they've been celebrating up to that point. So it's a kind of more of a kind of pensive, reflective mood, which I think rounds out the characters quite nicely.
Yeah,
it's a way of like doing the traditional downfall of the gangster you always get at the end, but it's the downfall is just a reflection on their own behaviour rather than something really dramatic. I thought it was quite nice.
Two plot things I wanted to touch on just quickly before we finish. So obviously, again, I watching this, I always kind of forget, or I'm taken aback a little bit when they're, the ending's happening and they get off the boat and go into the jetty, I'm going to call it, as they go up to the house, and Elaine gets taken out straight away. Like that always, I always kind of like just slipped my mind that that's exactly what happens there, right? In the way that it happens, he doesn't see any action. So I don't know, something because there's such a build up with the music and stuff like that, and you see them coming in through the bay, and then for just that to like cut, and then there's a very kind of stylized version of an 80s action movie finale as the girls go through and take everyone out, all these kind of drug dealers and stuff like that. And they're jumping, they're getting into pools and stuff. It's very kind of like, you could see it quite easily in an 80s action flick. And the other stuff is like, so we see Faith going home, and I think there's like two specific shots, like on the bus with her with her hand in the window, and then we see her lying down with her head on the seat. And when Cotty goes home after being shot like in the arm, we see almost the exact same, shots with her with the hand. I'm just, what do you think that was about? Was there anything there like about that mirroring of the two characters? Because other than that, I don't know what Cotty's connection to Faith is, other than like she's going home, she's doing the same thing, right? But she's going home because she's shot, whereas Faith was going before any of the stuff happened. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, if that means anything deeper. Or
so that'll do it for this episode on Spring Breakers. You've been listening to Cinema Subculture. If you like more of this content, please make sure you've subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
So thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
Spring break forever, y'all.
It was a nightmare.